Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 2024 release Civil War. And some people may be saying, why are you reviewing kind of like an action film? It's because horror is in war. This is a film that, well, I could say, first of all, this is a film I really did want to see because I love the films of Alex Garland and his other films like Ex Machina and Annihilation, which are phenomenal. And Men also all have horror to them. And I haven't reviewed Ex Machina on this channel, but I did review Annihilation and Men on this channel. So I really wanted to see Civil War, and I really wanted to talk about it, and I really wanted to put a review out there. But also, war is horrific. And, especially me being an American, being from the United States originally, and still living there. Um, it is very horrific to see stuff like this in a film. And so I know that a lot of other people probably would feel the same way seeing it. But anyway, that's kind of my explainer. Not like I needed to really explain myself because this is my channel. I can kind of review whatever I want to, honestly. But I usually try and keep it horror. So anyway, Civil War, written and directed by Alex Garland, who did Annihilation, Ex Machina, and Men. It has Kirsten Dunst in it, Nick Offerman, and Jesse Plemons. Those are the bigger names that end up appearing in it. Kirsten Dunst plays the main character. She's the one you're going to see the most on screen, and she does a good job. But I didn't love how the character is written. I think the character doesn't have enough depth. I don't think the character is understood well enough, especially even starting out with the film. And yeah, the development just doesn't get there for me. So I did have issues with this film, but overall, I also thought it was quite good at the same time. Pluses, minuses. Obviously, going to go over that in this no spoiler review. I ended up renting it for $6.35 through Fandango at Home, which was used to be known as Vudu. So I really wanted to watch it as soon as it came out on streaming, but it was like $20 to rent it, and I'm like, I'm just gonna wait until it comes down. So finally, $6.35. There you go. Quick synopsis. There isn't much to say. A lot of people already knew about this film going into it. It got a lot of media hype over the fact that here's a movie about the United States at Civil War. Is this going to cause more division? Spoiler, it didn't. Like there's already a lot of division, and from what I can tell, the film did not increase that at all whatsoever, especially because of the fact of the angle that this film takes. So if anyone's actually seen it, they know that this film focuses on journalists covering the war between basically California, Texas, Florida, and the rest of the United States. So like those three states are kind of together, and then the rest of the United States, which I think Garland kind of intentionally did it that way to not make sense, so that he's not actually like drawing real potential lines, like political or otherwise, that would potentially fuel people. So I think he really did try to kind of step away from that. The other thing he does with this film is not give you much of any insight into what's really transpired to start the war, or the personalities, or the humanity or people behind any of the sides. Honestly, the only people you're following are these journalists as they're rushing to try and get to Washington, D.C., because they believe that D.C. is going to end up falling, and the president along with it. That's the whole film. Like, there isn't a lot of story to it. It is an impactful story in certain ways, but there isn't a lot of story to it, and that's one of the reasons that I'm not going to give it like a ridiculously high rating. But what's done here is done pretty well for the most part. First of all, it looks phenomenal. I mean, Alex Garland, wonderful director, does a phenomenal job. Cinematography in his films is always outstanding. Same situation here. I haven't seen him do too much from an action standpoint, but the action sequences in this are very well shot, very impactful, very intense as well. Like, it feels like you're in it. I heard from people who saw it in the theater that the sound design in the theater for those moments was very, very intense, and actually increased things even more for the feel of the film. The film does immediately have a very somber and frightening weight to it. Again, especially if you're a person from the United States who's like, wow, like, you see something like that, and we as Americans are not used to ever seeing war on our soil, because everyone who did see war on American soil is not alive at this point. So everyone who's around now and would be seeing this movie, like, we've never seen something like that before. We only see the images, in movies or on shows or in documentaries or through the news that are happening in other countries. And we, always just have this idea that, well, that, that'll never be us. I mean, there's a possibility that that could happen hopefully way down the line, if that even does happen. Hopefully never, but hopefully way down the line if it inevitably happens. But yeah, it's just it's frightening, it really is. And they do a good job of kind of setting up these really kind of scary situations that the journalists get into, and they're supposed to basically be protected, but at the same time, like, it's not guaranteed that that's ever going to happen. I mean, look at real life with war journalists. Like, war journalists get killed all the time. Like, they're embedded with troops because they're trying to get the coverage and the photography and the footage that they need to get for their jobs, and it's dangerous. It's extremely dangerous. So yeah, but for that reason, there are some really intense situations where, like, a lot of the times they act like, it's whatever, like, we're going to be fine, like, we're kind of protected because, like, it says we're journalists and people know we're journalists, but at the same time, like, accidents happen, or some people just don't care that they're basically supposed to be protected, and that's real life, unfortunately. It's weird. It is weird trying to follow journalists in this war that they've created here, because they're very calm, and especially when there's, like, chaos around them. And again, because it's like, this is what they do, this is their job. So it's a little bit weird as a audience member to see something horrific and ridiculous like this going on, but then trying to identify with the characters who are just seem a little blasé about it. And for that reason, I actually think the film doesn't fully work as far as engaging the audience in any sort of feelings. This film was intentionally supposed to be from, like, a neutral standpoint or point of view, and I think it works against making the film more impactful. It definitely could have been a lot more impactful. I mean, mainly, I really think what they should have been doing is kind of going further into at least one or two people on each side of the actual conflict that's going on, and also kind of fleshing out and explaining how they got to that point. But that stuff just doesn't really happen. I'm not a fan of a lot of the music that ends up getting used in this, especially the stuff that's not, like, established music that people have heard before. It's kind of annoying and repetitive in its nature, so a lot of stuff, it just doesn't jive with this film, unfortunately. So music selection wasn't great for me. It was not quite there. Tidbits about how things have fallen apart are slowly revealed through dialogue. I did like that aspect of it, but once again, I also wish that in that same fashion, we would have gotten tidbits about what transpired. How did we get to this point? It tells you how in disrepair things are and kind of the issues in the world at that point, but it's not telling you how did we get here and what's the underlying problem. And I think they didn't do that because they don't want anyone leaning on, well, I'm rooting for these people or I'm rooting for these people. They wanted to keep that out of it, but it just makes it harder to connect with the movie that way. You do get frustrated seeing the journalists just watching things happen because it feels like it trivializes life. Once again, talking about having a hard time getting the audience really involved with this, just because your main characters are just these people who see terrible things going on and are just like, yep, those are terrible things. This is what we're used to seeing, and we're just gonna take pictures of it. Next. And it doesn't work that great. The action sequences are appropriately intense, but they're also nameless people you don't know. So the impact that could have been there, that opportunity is gone. Like, it was never there. Because goes back to what I was saying, is I feel like we should have gotten some insight into at least a person or two on each side of the conflict. Then you could have still kept it neutral in leanings, because you would know, because you would have feel for each side at that time, but you would also feel like you care when people are getting killed. Because in this, like, you don't really care as much because these are just like, I don't know who that person is. I don't know what their motivations are. I don't know what they've done in their lives. I don't know, why this is happening. Like, it's just whatever. But I guess that also is just kind of what Garland was trying to create, that sort of feeling of just being outside of it and not caring as much. But it just doesn't feel right for it being like a civil war on American soil. You know what I mean? I don't think the main character's story arc feels like it plays out in a believable way. There are some decisions that the character makes that don't feel very realistic for who the character is. And again, like I said before, the character is not established very well. The character is not developed very well at all. So when things happen with this character that are supposed to be more impactful, they just don't hit that well. Or at least not for me. The ending is kind of solid. Good enough in my opinion. So I mean, it is a good film. It's just there's a lot of missed opportunities, and I think the big issue is that this is Alex Garland, and myself and a lot of other people expect a lot more from Alex Garland based off what he's done. I think, from a technical standpoint, a lot of the stuff was there other than that music situation, but the writing just was not there enough. Good enough, but not good enough. You know what I mean? One thing this film should do is give people more of an appreciation for what war journalists have to go through and how dangerous that profession is. That is something that I think people can take from this. It's not something that we think about a whole lot. War journalism in general as like an everyday thing, but it's dangerous. It is an important job. And it's extremely dangerous, and people are putting themselves in harm's way to be able to report this stuff. Nobody alive in the United States right now has experienced war on American soil. This film shows how awful that would be, somewhat. I say somewhat, obviously, because it doesn't really, tell you what's going on or endear you to any of the characters who are being killed or anything. It's that whole thing. But there are some terrible, horrific things, and it will make most people kind of think about, man, like I've never seen, this carnage on American soil, and just, I hope that never happens, basically. Normal people. But, yeah, I mean, those are my thoughts on Civil War. I wanted a lot more from it, but I still enjoyed it. I still think it is a good film. Out of 5 stars, half stars in play, I'm going to go 3.5. I'm between 3 and 3.5, but I'm going to go 3.5 just because it does look really great and the action is done really well. And I appreciate the idea behind what they were trying to do. And they do create the feeling that they were trying to go for. I just think it's harder to engage the audience with what they chose to do. So it's a 3.5 for me, but it's kind of a weak 3.5. So just know that. But anyway, this is where I'd love to hear your opinions on the film. Go ahead and put it down in the comments. If you love it, hate it, in between, we can talk about that. Also, thumbs up on this video if you want to help me with that algorithm situation. Go ahead and, I don't know, I'm getting this weird, like, fireworks display. That's a weird feature that my camera's doing. It's just like fireworks behind me. Very weird. It probably won't show up on your end, but it was a very weird thing. If it does show up on your end, bonus. That's awesome. But yeah, go ahead and subscribe. I would really appreciate that. Hit the notification bell button if you want to know when I'm putting up new videos. And thank you so much for your time. I appreciate that. Anyway, thank you. And until next time, keep it brutal.